Hi everyone, my name is Jacob. I am the Chief Operating Officer with Admin by Request. I've been doing software development for going on 20 plus years now and have found my niche in making IT security approachable by companies of all sizes and complexity. Besides that, I'm kind of a custom keyboard aficionado, and in my daily work, I help companies build safer IT environments by utilizing zero trust principles. So, why are we here? Well, did you ever have anybody tell you to just trust them and then immediately feel that need to double check your pockets for your wallet? Well, why is that? Well, it's because trust me doesn't actually instill any trust. Yet in IT, we've been using trust for a long time. But in today's world, where you can hire ransomware as a service attacks, it's really not a security strategy. So if you've been in IT for a while, you'll remember the good old days of IT, the simpler times, right? Everything was in closed networks. Everything was behind impenetrable firewalls. People worked from within that impenetrable wall. Like, it almost made sense to trust. Now, in the new world, everything's changed, right? So we have remote work, we have cloud services, and you need access from everywhere. Your users are sitting at home or in cafes or in airports, and your privileges are basically riding shotgun with them. So that old model of building a perimeter and then trust everything inside it, well, it's broken. It's not just cracked, it's literally exploded. So today, we're going to look a bit at why zero trust isn't just this theoretical idea anymore, but for a lot of companies, it's actually becoming more about survival. So when I did this presentation, I kind of thought, all right, so how do I create something with a complex and huge topic like zero trust and still make it approachable? Not making it this technical mumbo jumbo, but actually doing something that people will remember and can relate to. So my choice fell on storytelling, because storytelling can help us make a huge complex topic more approachable. So I'll start with introducing the good old days and how they've changed and how this change affected the entire IT security landscape. And I'll add some simplified real-world stories about what happens when trust goes wrong, when privilege, access, and trust goes unchecked, and maybe you'll recognize some of these scenarios from your own organization. I'm hoping the light mood of this presentation will make the points more approachable, and if not, well, then I hope you enjoy the stories and thank the Lord that you have a handle on these concepts and this is not a problem in your organization. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll leave here with a few ideas to look into. So the reality of things is trust will go wrong. It's impossible to protect against an attacker who already has the keys to the kingdom. So zero trust is not just about tools. It's about mindset. It's about verifying everything, users, devices, access, and actions, and designing your security in a way that always assumes breach and not just tries to prevent it. So with storytelling, we need somebody to tell the story. Every good story needs a protagonist, or unsung hero, if you will. So meet Dave. Dave is the IT manager of a medium-sized company. He's very skilled at what he does. He's hardworking. He's been in IT for a long time, and he puts a lot of effort into making his company and his coworkers feel safe. We all know a Dave. There's probably a Dave or two among us right now. Dave trusts his technical setup that they spend a lot of time and effort getting in place. He trusts his firewalls, he trusts his VPNs, and because of the secure setup, he trusts his coworkers. Because why wouldn't he? Now, Dave isn't stupid. He's just trying to get the job done the best he knows how. Now, Dave remembers the good old days, right? Everything was behind very secure and restricted walls. You had these big old firewalls configured, you had hardwired networks, you had users actually sitting on location at their desk, connected via physical cables to local servers and drives. You could literally walk down to a user and physically help them out with a problem. Now in this setup, security basically meant hardening the perimeter even more, ensuring that you kept unwanted guests on the outside and trust on the inside. So the most regular threat would be like a rogue USB stick or somebody clicking in a spam mail. Now, life was simple, right? And a bit more trusting. The good life. Until everything changed. So all of a sudden, not that long ago, all of a sudden we introduced remote work. We started talking about mobile access and cloud services and third parties that needed access, vendors, bring your own device. And all of a sudden, this perimeter, this castle wall that we built, all of a sudden this needs a lot more gates, a lot more windows, a lot more doors that we can't protect anymore. All of a sudden, our users are on the outside, but they still need access to the gate. They still need privilege. So what does this mean? Well, it means that humans are the real attack surface. So we built the walls, we fortified the gates, we locked down the servers, and we set up VPN for the users who needed access. And for a while, this was enough. The walls held. But then attackers got smarter. And why would you try to break through an impenetrable firewall when somebody out the outside has the keys to the gate? Why not just try to trick the user outside of the gate? So that's what they did. They started to target the users outside the walls. If we look a bit at the most recent statistics, 95% of all breaches stem from some kind of human error. 95%. 41% of attack start with a phishing attack, meaning that an attacker has actively made a decision to go after a user in the hopes that this user has privilege or access or data that can be exploited. And in over 40% of all attacks, in some areas like production industries, over 45% of attacks involve malware, meaning an attacker has actively targeted a user and that user has had enough privilege to actually execute a piece of malware. So in reality, this means that attackers aren't targeting Dave's infrastructure anymore. They're going after his users. It gives them the same result, but with a much higher success rate. Because with companies running a defensive strategy of let's build bigger walls, attackers have chosen a much easier attack strategy now that the users are outside the wall. They'll just target Bob, right? Because why would I even try to spend a lot of time trying to break through this well-configured firewall? Why not just go after Bob in accounting, right? Bob has access. Bob clicks stuff. Now, this isn't because Bob is a bad guy, but Bob's reaction pattern is one based on psychology and trust. And that's a lot easier to attack than a cold, reasoning, well-configured firewall. So what does this mean? Where does this leave us with our old setup, if you may? Does this mean that everything is just basically doesn't matter anymore? It doesn't, right? Perimeter defenses still matter a lot, right? You still need to protect yourself, keeping unwanted visitors on the outside. But they can no longer stand alone. It's no longer enough because your users have the keys and the attackers know about it. So this leaves us with a setup where privilege and access are the new attack surfaces. So with attackers becoming smarter and the IT security landscape becoming way more fractioned, what can we do? How do we begin to secure anything now that everything's changed? Well, this is where Zero Trust come in. Now, first off, it's about embracing the fact that it's not about building better walls. It's about building smarter trust. The Zero Trust principle flips the old model and says, don't implicitly trust users even if they are on the inside of your perimeter. And don't implicitly trust devices even if they are company issued because they might have been compromised. And don't implicitly trust apps, sessions, or locations because they might have been compromised. Instead, Zero Trust leads us to follow these principles about never trust anything implicitly, always verify, always ensure the least amount of privilege, and always assume that every access attempt is a potential breach. Because if you start thinking about every attempt as a potential breach, the way you think about security changes. So as an example, right, every access attempt should always provide who are you, what device you're using, why do you need access, and some step of active reasoning and approval actually permitting this access, and obviously complete logging of everything. So with Zero Trust, it's no longer about keeping users out, it's about letting the right users in, right? Dave doesn't need bigger walls. What he needs is smarter gates. Now, when people hear about Zero Trust, there is a bit of misconception about what Zero Trust is. So Zero Trust is not about MFA. It's not about better password policies, or it's not about locking everyone out, right? These are great traits, but it's not actually what Zero Trust is about. So Zero Trust is a mindset that can and should be added to everything in your environment that requires access or privilege. Because Zero Trust touches everything, right? It doesn't matter if Bob needs admin access to run an application, if he wants to connect to a server, if he wants to download a file, or if he picks up a nice looking USB device on the bus that somebody randomly left behind and then he slams it into his company laptop. All of these scenarios should be handled with the same mindset and control. So in admin by request, we work a lot with privilege management and remote access. So for privileges, for instance, well, in a lot of companies, users have far more power than they actually need. They're local admins all the time, just in case they need it. The Zero Trust principles will flip that, saying, well, access should always be least privilege and just in time. Users should not per default have any privilege they don't need. That way you assume breach, and if an account is actually compromised, well, then the attacker doesn't inherit uncontrollable superpowers. The same goes for remote access. So how do people connect from the outside in? Well, with a classic VPN setup, if not restricted, it'll basically drop users in, or devices for that matter, directly into the full network. And with unmanaged privilege, well, they can basically do as they please, basically giving them the master key to the entire building. With Zero Trust, there needs to be an active approved access attempt, and it should only be granted to a specific system based on a verified identity, just in time and time limited. Again, if an account or device is compromised, it doesn't lead to leaked access. Now, Zero Trust is also a cultural change in a lot of organizations, and hence change is hard, so implementation can be tricky. And simply removing access and privilege just won't cut it. So I've collected some tales from the realms of IT about when trust goes wrong. These are stories collected throughout my own professional career and through some of the customers that we touch base with in admin by request. So I'll start off with what I call the zero-sum problem. Now, this is one general problem that we see in a lot of companies, and it is one of the cornerstones in why a pragmatic implementation of Zero Trust principle and toolings matter. So we have Dave. Dave works in the IT department of a medium-sized company. And as with all IT departments, management tasks them with taking care of the company's IT needs, right? So Dave and his team gets to work and, well, they set up the internet and routers and network, and they make sure that the printers are working and that the coffee makers all work, right? All of the needs that you look for your IT team to basically handle. Now, at some point, management will also task Dave and his team with security as well, right? We don't want to get hacked and we don't want to be infected with virus. So Dave says, all right, well, fair enough. We'll go ahead and we'll set up a firewall and we'll install antivirus software and we'll even set up a spam filter, right? And it worked. The walls were strong, the users were on the inside, and then everything changed, right? So now that Dave realizes that his users are the new attack vector, privilege is the great problem, users simply have too much power. What do? Well, Dave has a great idea. And as with all great ideas, it's ingenious in its simplicity. We'll just remove all the privileges, right? No privilege, no problem. And that is how Dave single-handedly solved one of the biggest dilemmas in IT security today. All on a Tuesday before lunch, right? It worked great for about half an hour. All of a sudden, help desk gets flooded with users not being able to install software, not being able to run software, not being able to do reporting, right? Not being able to do their job. Now, Dave's actions has led the company into the classic zero-sum problem that a lot of companies trying to implement Zero Trust or IT security in general faces. In the zero-sum problem, IT doesn't want to give up privilege because they're unmanaged and basically a nuke in the hands of the employee, right? Whenever IT gives up privilege, they basically compromise their mandate to handle security. Now, the employee doesn't really care about privilege, right? They don't care if they're full admin all the time. They care about being able to do their job without IT compromising that mandate. Classic zero sum, no one side can win without the other side losing. So what do? Well, Dave had another brilliant idea. Recognizing the fact that, all right, users do actually need to install software once in a while. Dave and his team comes up with the software shop. So the software shop is an internal shop filled with pre-approved installers that user can install without needing privilege, right? Problem solved. But as Dave's about to realize, no good deed goes unpunished. Now, helpdesk starts getting requests like, well, that's great, but the software that I need isn't actually in the shop. So Dave and his team scramble, say, all right, well, fair enough. We'll go ahead and we'll need to vet some more software and we'll need to get that added to the list. And there we go, right? And helpdesk start getting new requests saying, well, that's all fine and dandy, but I don't actually need software to install. I actually need privilege to do other stuff like run reporting, right? So realizing that users actually need privilege, Dave and his team goes ahead and say, all right, well, how do we fix this? Well, we add a new item to the shop. The 1-year local admin rights. Instant bestseller, right? It's time limited, must be safer, so what's the harm? Well, soaring reviews start coming in about how easy and how nice it is to be able to do whatever you please and like without IT interfering, right? Attackers and their malware think so too, right? True story. So the zero-sum problem is not something specific to Dave's company, right? A lot of companies struggle with this every day. Security versus usability, all or nothing. The uncomfortable truth is that when productivity and security goes head to head, most often productivity wins. This isn't because people don't care about security, but being an employee in a very, 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 very secure company and not being able to produce, well, that's a rather short company story as well. Now, obviously, Dave's software shop has a few glaring problems, right? So number one, it's smack full of a lot of outdated software that no one updated. So this just introduces a lot of security holes. And the 1-year local admin access is not a solution. It's in fact the complete opposite of solution, wrapped in a sentiment of, well, it's time limited, so it's much safer. Now, what Dave really needed, he needed just-in-time privilege, right? Temporary control privilege for specific application or actions, fully locked, approved when necessary, and revoked when not. Because it's not about no privilege or full privilege, right? It's about controlled and just-in-time privilege. So one of the tricky parts about implementing zero trust concepts is that you need to find a balanced response to the zero-sum problem to succeed with removing privilege. Another one we see is the story of the temporary admin, right? The software shop story shows us that users need privilege once in a while, but in order to accommodate this, adding a 1-year full admin right is probably not the way to go, right? So the temporary admin is something that we come across in admin by request with our customers as well. So one afternoon, Steve from helpdesk needs to troubleshoot an issue on a device, and fast. Now, unfortunately, the troubleshooting required privilege. So Steve visits Dave. Unfortunately, Dave is busy. So, wanting to help Steve out, because Steve is really good at what he does, he is technical proficient, Dave goes ahead and says, all right, well, I'll give you privilege and I'll revoke it tomorrow morning, right? What could possibly go wrong, right? It's just a quick fix. We've done this a million times before. Well, it depends on what Steve actually does with that privilege. Now, in this case, he downloaded a diagnostic tool off some website, trying to solve that problem he was currently facing. Looked legit, so he ran it. And just like that, the malware had a foothold. And now, the panic monster comes out to play. So that one elevated session touched a network share. That network share was mapped to production systems. And before anyone noticed, the malware had spread everywhere. So Dave and his team spent weeks cleaning up. Production went offline. And they had to go public to customers because data was exposed. Nobody wants to find themselves on the front page, right? And this wasn't something that was caused by a bad person with ill intent. This was caused by a trusted internal employee doing what they thought was right to help out a coworker, right? But all good intentions aside, it just takes that one click, right? Even the most technical, adept, most trusted employee can make bad choices, right? Now, users will require privilege, but they will not require God mode enabled all the time, right? This is why just-in-time elevation matters, right? It's not about removing local admin. It's about having a safe and controlled way to temporarily elevate applications with approval and with auditability. Because temporary access without control is basically just access. All right, last one, the story about the forgotten laptop. So, have you ever had company equipment go missing or at least be unaccounted for and not realizing it right away? Dave has too, because Dave's just a really unlucky guy. So Dave's company utilizes VPN to gain access to the company network of servers for users working remote, right? Worked like a charm as it was based on device trust. Users just booted up their issue laptop. The VPN client connected automatically because it came from a trusted device, right? Easy, no user interaction required. Users were happy, Dave was happy. Now, unfortunately, the same held true when a trusted device disappeared without anyone noticing. Now, in this case, a decommissioned laptop got swiped from stock, but it could just as well have been sold off, or it could just as well have been a private laptop being trusted and then brought home to later be sold off or just go missing, right? Now, blind access to the entire internal network and stored IP credentials, well, now the intruder had full access to the networks and the servers. The only detection for this was actually a tech thinking, what's Steve old laptop doing accessing the server? It's sitting on a shelf in IT, spelling the return of the dreaded panic monster. Who's using the laptop? Now, this is what happens when endpoint privilege and remote access is unmanaged, right? This is not just a risk when the device is active, but it's a lingering threat as the device is now actually a physical key to the gate. So zero trust means verifying devices just like users and verifying remote access attempts in exactly the same manner. Who wants to connect to what, from where, and why? And then an active assessment of, should this actually be allowed? Because a forgotten laptop without these security measures in place is basically a loaded weapon waiting to be found. And attackers love these kind of device setups because they actually have a key they can sell off, right? It's basically like hitting the jackpot. So what can we learn from Dave and these stories? Well, first off, the zero-sum problem, right? It's not a matter of no privilege versus full privilege. It's a matter of control just enough privilege just in time. So security versus productivity. Productivity will always win, right? The temporary admin, well, uncontrolled temporary access is just access. It only takes one click to trigger a disaster. It doesn't matter if you have uncontrolled God mode enabled for just a second or for a complete year. You're setting yourself up for a potential disaster. Even the most trusted employee can and will make mistakes. And default privilege and device trust is just a disaster waiting to happen, not only when the device is active, but also when they're forgotten. 3 stories, 1 pattern. Too much trust, not enough control. Now, zero trust isn't just a theory, right? It's actually the answer to every one of these problems if you apply it properly. So if Dave's company didn't have any default trust, none of the situations would have happened. If Dave's company had implemented just-in-time access, they wouldn't find themselves in the zero-sum problem, mindset and tooling. So does this mean that we actually just need to start from scratch, right? Scrap everything we have, all of our policies, and then start completely over? No. The perimeters are still valid and necessary, but they will need to have new principle added in order to keep up with the changing landscape. So if you want to start implementing zero trust principles, well, where do you begin? Well, a good place to start is to get a grasp of where you're at on a maturity level. If you're ranking at the implicit trust level with local admin accounts and unrestricted VPN, well, get started, right? When doing zero trusts, it's important to acknowledge the human factor. So zero trust isn't just tech, it's cultural, right? You're not just changing tools, you're changing habits. And that takes clarity, patience, and buy-in. So a basic understanding of where you are currently on your journey can help you navigate. The goal isn't necessarily to get to zero trust mindset completely implemented now, but at least to improve on high-risk items while planning for the bigger push, right? If you already have MFA in place, well, good. Start thinking about least privilege, right? If you already had isolated access, good. Start thinking about just-in-time access, right? One step at a time. Tooling can help a lot with this. So let's get practical. What do you do if you're in Dave's position, right? You've got users with too many privileges, remote work is everywhere, and that old security model is falling apart. How do you actually start applying zero trust in a way that works without having to scramble every single setup you currently have? Well, start by introducing principles via tools that work for you, not the other way around. So start at the base, remove local admin rights. But introduce means to do control just-in-time elevations. Otherwise, you end up with the zero-sum problem, right? Remove broad access VPN and look towards control just-in-time remote access, and treat inventory like users. Do not implicitly trust them. And audit actions so that you know what's actually happening in your setup and can react accordingly. How do you react if you don't know what privilege is being used for? So, key takeaways from this, right? Trust is a good thing, just not as an IT security, right? Start thinking about your security design for the world as it currently is, and not as the way that it was or as we wished it might be. Realize the fact that privilege is the new power, right? And the biggest vulnerability you have in your company are your users, right? Realize that Zero Trust isn't a tool, right? You can't just download Zero Trust, install it, and you're good to go. It's a mindset. It's about change, but a lot of these principles can be greatly aided by using tools. And always remember to balance security and usability, because in most company, when security and productivity goes head to head, productivity wins, right? So find a way to balance the zero-sum game. If you're interested in seeing how we at Admin by Request implement Zero Trust principles in a very, very easy manner, well, I would urge you to download a free plan and get started. You won't regret it. Trust me.